Good evening for exploring art mediums tonight. Tonight we're doing a cherry blossom wreath with an oriental influenced blossom, and so we're going to be needing to practice our flower, and so we need a piece of paper to begin with. It can be mixed media paper or computer paper. It doesn't have to be watercolor paper, but you want a piece of paper to practice our petals and our color mixing. Tonight, you're going to be doing a puddle of color. And so I brought my pie plate because it's the only thing in the house that I found that has a white bottom, so I can show you the different color that we're mixing. And so you're going to need a little thing to mix a pool of color. And whether it's a plate or it's one of those little things, plates with the cups in it, some sort of place for that. We need a pencil and we need a small circular shape to trace this. I'm going to be using my round mouse pad, or you can use a salad plate or a roll of tape. Your roll of tape would make a very small wreath though, so I suggest getting a salad plate out of your cupboard to trace your circle, or a mouse pad. So let's begin tonight by tracing the circle onto our paper. We don't need to tape it down since we're using hardly any watercolor at all. So we won't need to tape it down. Okay, to begin with, we're going to just trace a circle. Do it very, very, very lightly. In fact, we may want to, I'm going to leave mine dark, but I suggest you take an eraser and just buff out the darkest parts, just so you have just a hint of it. So we can set that aside for a minute. What we're going to do tonight is there's three full blooms at the top facing open and 3 at the bottom. Now on this one, I did a little bit bigger and I was able to fit, 3 blossoms on the sides here, 1 full, and then we've got our half ones. So depending on your circle, you might not be able to fit these full ones on the side. Just depends how big your paintbrush is and all that. So that's why you need to be a little bit fluid and kind of willing to, you might not end up with 3, 6, 7, 8 big flowers and 4 side petals. Does that make sense? So let's go ahead and get our piece of paper out, and I'm going to show you how to mix the colors first of all. So if I were to take this palette, and as you can see, we're working in these colors up here, but I'm going to do it in here. We need quite a bit of colors. We're going to take red and just get it all wet. If you've got wet watercolors in the tube, you can just squeeze it out in your palette. I'm going to put the red in here. If you have the color rose pink or something like that, you don't even have to mix it. Most of us just have the basic. I'm taking purple next, that's right next to the red, and I'm putting some of that in. And then I'm going to go into my brown. Okay, now I'm going to start mixing this up, and we're going to get a rosy, dusty rose color. That's pretty true on the camera. I think mine's a little pinker than what it shows on the camera. We want a mauve color. Do you remember how popular mauve was once upon a time? That's kind of what we're looking for. Okay, that will get us started. Now this brush I was mixing with is too big for my painting. I'm going to be using a number 6, and you can use the green one that comes at the library if you want. The thing is, what we're looking for in a paintbrush, we want a rigger brush, basically, a kind of one that holds a lot of color. But if it has a point, then we don't have to switch to a pointed brush a lot of the times. I can get by using this one brush through the whole exercise tonight. And that's just a number 6, and 8 would be fine too. So to construct a blossom, it takes 4 shapes. I'm just going to show you on this piece of paper. The first stroke is just a line like that, and then a line, a C shape the other way. These are outside marks that we're going to be using for a petal. Okay. Now you can continue along, practicing along the whole line if you would like. The next one is a downstroke C, and this is a petal forming, and you push down and release and come up. And the second one is, so you can just know that you're pushed down and come up. The third one goes the opposite direction, push down and come up. So those 3, 1, 2, 3, 4 different strokes create our blossom, and I'll show you how. It goes one down, another one down, then the outside, and then an outside. And this can have multiple little strings to add variety. So you're going downstroke to the left, downstroke to the right, and little lines on either side. There is one more that you may find. Instead of turning your page around, you're going to be doing petals that go downwards. So we're going to do a couple of those that actually starts the other way, and it's going to go down upwards like that. So we can paint it either way, and then you're going to have lines like that. Flower that we're going to use is 5 petals. So if I were to draw that, it would be a circle, some variation of that. Now we're going to do a side view first of all. And so that's looking at the side of a blossom as it's just coming out. So we're going to start at the base, and we're going to have a petal this way, petal up, and a petal to the side. And then you have your little lines. Okay. So let's paint those 2 to begin with. You're going to want to leave the center open. Do not paint in the center. One way you can add interest is to go into your brown with your paint, with the pink still on your brush, and you're going to go in and do a little bit of streaking in there to give it definition. Okay. The other thing we will do at the very end is add the gold color, the mustard color. Oh, yellow ochre. So we're going to be adding yellow ochre once this is dry. We'll be adding yellow ochre dots just to the middle for the stamens. Okay. So let's do a side view. There's one petal coming down in the center, one petal off to the side, and another one off to the opposite side. Again, I'm going to go into my brown. Our brown let's talk a minute about the branches on the twig that goes around the wreath, the cherry branch. We're not going to draw a solid line. We're going to be making small strokes to create our branch. Okay, so I'm not going like this. I'm not doing a thick line like that. I want little tiny strokes to show the roughness of the cherry wood. So next we need to talk about intensity. And we kind of went over this last month, but if you weren't in the class last month, I'm going to repeat it. You'll probably notice that in your palette that there's different intensities where it's pooling. We're going to find 3 different intensities. We want, and they're called tea, milk, and butter. So just like tea is very weak and opaque, very light in color compared to coffee. Oops. We're going to just take a little piece and it's going to be very light. Okay, lots of water. So this one is about 75% water and 25% color. Okay. Now our milk is going to be equal. It's going to be half water, half paint. So it's 50-50. And then butter is our darkest of all. And I'm not even sure any of this is butter. So I'm going to go back in my color. And I'm going to make a really strong color. I'm getting purple and adding brown. I want a very strong color. You see that? That's going to be our butter. Now, when we have that mixed up, that will be the centers. That'll be these veins coming out and any lines up on the petals. You're going to be using the butter to enhance detail on the petals. And that's where we'll use that dark color. Okay, and that is about 95% color with about 5% water. Very thick. And then finally, I need to teach you about 3 different wet techniques we're going to be doing. So I'm going to paint. I want you to do the same. I want you to paint one square right here. And it's going to dry solid. And then I'm going to do a wet one over here. And I'm going to dip in my brown and just do a line underneath it. And we're going to watch it go up into that. So you can almost tip it and watch that brown go up. I might need to wet it a little bit more. There we go. You can see it just flowing, right? So that's called bleeding. And you can watch it spread out and do its magic. It's one of my favorite things. And then the next one we're going to do is wet on wet. And we use it, it's very similar. It's the same thing. But what we may do is we may do a shade but before it dries, we're going to add color on top of it quickly. And so it bleeds as it goes through. So you're going to just paint a line through and watch it kind of disperse out. Okay. This one we're going to wait until it dries and then add the line, and you'll see it is it's wet on dry. Meaning that the paint underneath has dried. In fact, it's pretty As long as it's not cold, it's pretty dry. You can test it by just touching it, and if it doesn't have a cool feel to it, that means it's dry. If it's still wet, you could make it print though, so you'd be careful. Anyway, so I'm going to take a wet line through this, and it should not bloom like this one. Okay, so those are the 3 things that we're going to be using tonight. So make sure you have a lot of paint. I've got this much paint to work with. It should be enough, but we also can make more as we go on. I'm going to start at the top because I don't want to be dragging my hand through the, rubbing my sleeve on the bottom one. So I'm going to start at the top up here. And of course, I'm going to start in the center. So we're just going to do a full flower face, and we want tea, so we want it very light. So I'm adding quite a bit of water over to the side over here because we just want a very light brush of it. Okay, and so we're just going to go start here. I'm going to make mine a little bit darker so you guys can see it better. We do our 2 C shapes and then the lines to the side. Okay. While it's still wet, I'm going to take my butter, which is this dark stuff right here. I'm just going to pick up a little bit up on the tip, and I'm going to go in and create some lines. You want to go in the white just a little bit with those lines to show that it's all connected. Does that make sense? So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put 2 flowers, 1 on either side. Now, if you get too close to it, you're going to have to tuck the petal. You might not see all the petal of one of these flowers, which is totally fine. They can be touching, like right there. I wasn't able to complete the whole petal because this one was in the way, and it just tucks up behind it. That makes sense. Again, you want to use a very light color. Again, I can't do the whole petal on this side. While it's still wet, take your dark, again, your butter mix. So now I'm going to go over here and do a flower on the right-hand side. And take those lines from the white into the wet. So we're going from dry into wet on wet, and it's kind of going to bloom a little bit. That makes sense. So from here, So from here, we're going to leave a little bit of space so that we can do our branches between these three. And then we're going to do a side petal and a side petal. Okay. So they're facing downward, and these ones will be facing upward when we get to them. So it just is opposite. So on my line, I'll look for my pencil mark. I'm going to come around with some wood with a cherry branch. So I just want to start right here. That's my center one. I'm going to go off to the left and off to the right. And remember to use those little petals lines too. That adds a lot of interest. Okay, so I have room to do a full blossom right here. So again, I'll show you on the real one, the finished piece. We're going to do one on this side and one over here. Leave a little bit of a space in between to put some wood. You don't want the blossoms touching. So you're going to have to adjust your blossoms accordingly to the size of paintbrush you have. If your paint's drying out, you just add more water, and that gets you back to that tea color that you're looking for. Oh, I forgot to go back and do the dark in these ones. I'm going to go back. And these ones actually kind of extend down because you're going to be attaching them to the branch. So make them come out. Does that make sense? These petals look like they're kind of just attached that way. Okay. And then go back and do the same kind of thing in here. Okay, so I want to show, we're going to go ahead and do the branching and all the blossoms, and we're going to finish this top half. So we're going to take a good mixture. You don't have to rinse your brush or anything. Just wet it and go pick up some brown and put it in your plate. Now we can make this darker. If your brown is too light, you can add a little bit of black to it or even blue. And that will darken up your brown. Okay, so remember, we're just doing strokes, little lines. So right here, I'm just going to do a few lines in between there. I'm going to do kind of like a stem that's coming up on this side, right there. I'm going to try to do just a little bit of brown between those ones. And then we have a lot of brown between these, between our side bloom and the other. We're actually going to take off and do a few little side stems on this one. since we have a bit of room, and we're going to do some little petals afterwards on this. That makes sense? So same on this side, we have more room, so we're going to do some streaks. And I'm going to come off here also with little nubs. We're going to do little blossom nubs. Now you might think, okay, then how do we continue down to the bottom? The same thing. We're going to just be attaching the top of it this time. Okay. Again, I'm going to do kind of a jiggity thing at the ends. Okay. Over here. There. Okay. Now there's a thing that we do that we're going to paint, and it's called an accent, like little fallen petals. And it's just pink. It's going to be a medium mixture. The milk mixture, not too light. You want some color. But what you're going to do is, let me show you on the example. You're going to just be doing these little dots that just give you the hint of little petals all over, if that makes sense. They're not real flowers. They're just the dots of flowers. Okay? And that's through the whole thing. And you want different intensity. See, these are quite dark where there might be some that are lighter. So go ahead and use different intensity of color. So what we're going to do, because right now is kind of plain. And so what we're going to do is just add some little petals. Just willy-nilly, wherever you want. But see, that livens it up. It gives it action. And it doesn't have to be where there's wood. It can just be anywhere. Just do different shapes, turn your brush every which way. I'm going to do some darker ones over on this side. I think I'm only going to we're going to start with our 3 flowers down here. We're going to be starting with our 3 flowers and then do the 2 side petals right there. And so I think that's where we'll go. Our flower right here, their center flower. Going in deep with my dark color, butter color, to add lines. Oh, one thing I forgot to do is the yellow ochre in the stamens, for the stamens up in here. The other thing that you can do, let me just show you real quick. I'm going to go on this dry one. You can go back with your butter, which is the thick, darkest color, and you can go up and add more lines to your petal if you want. If you want to, you can add more dimension if you would like. After it's dried. So that would be a wet on dry technique. The other thing we need to do is add the yellow ochre. Or if all you have is lemon, that's fine too. The lemon yellow. But I'm just going to you just do dots in here. I'm starting on my other side flower. We've got 2 of them, our last full flowers. Okay. So I finished my 3 flowers in the middle. Now I'm going to do side petals facing upwards. So they're opposite of these ones. They're just going to be in there. So I don't know if you can see. Okay, so see how I added dark up here in the petals on this side view? So then over here, it's very flat. It's like all 3 blend together. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to define this one by doing a darker color around the petals. And that just gives it a little bit more definition. Okay, let's finish this brown. Then I'm going to add my petals. Remember, we want all different intensity of them. I think my brown is really fading a lot. I think I'm going to add a little bit of blue to it to make it darker. So I am going back over some of my twigs to make it darker. So you could do that too. You can darken it up a little and go over just some twisty, knotty, make it so that there's a variation in your bark. We need to do the yellow ochre in these 3 open flowers and then we're done. Thanks for joining me this month.